Hi, welcome to the AT Osteo Chronicles. I'm Brynn Bicknell, and
And I'm Jenna Howe. Today we're going to be talking with Joe about herbal support during concussion recovery.
Hello, my name is Joe Boni, and I'm with Blue Angel House, and I'm a medical herbalist here in Richmond. And hopefully, answer the questions of these two ladies about what things we could do to help back up for various different concussion protocols.
Thank you. And we really appreciate you being here. I know Brynn and I talk often about herbals and how they can support post-concussion. I talk a lot about it with clients over the years. Certainly energetic aspects of post-concussion, what's happening into the body. So I know it's a common conversation, but it doesn't always seem like it's a common add-on, which is, I think, a great way to kind of introduce you to the post-concussion landscape, and certainly to our clients that we've been working with over the years. And I think it's just a really important part of the conversation. It's not just about supplements. It's just this wider knowledge of other things that can be really helpful.
And Jenna, I have to say, I'm so glad that you invited me onto the show because this is one of the things that most herbalists would just overwhelmingly welcome the opportunity to be able to speak about, because Western phytotherapy, which is what I do, is actually the blend of the energetics of the medicine meeting with modern science. We do back up a lot of what we do with the science. There are a lot of research that goes into the herbs. So we look at it from the energetics of how to match it with the person, but there's certainly those phytochemicals that each of these plants possess that help for a specific condition, which is what we're trained to do, is to pick from that group the ones energetically we think will work best for the person. And that's why having this opportunity to talk about it is really exciting for me as well. So thank you.
perfect. So, can you tell us a little bit more about the energy aspect regarding concussion and how you would approach that?
Yeah, so like the best way to talk about that for most is just kind of talk about how we formulate. And so the way that I was taught to formulate and the way that I do formulate is we always have, it's kind of a pyramid, right? So there's the star of the show, we'll call it, which will be the main herb. That will be the one that is for a percussive protocol that will have a affinity for the brain or the head. And then we'll have its two supporting actors, we'll call, which one or two, and that's usually to help complement the star of the show. And then what we have is that last tier, which is what we call the balancers. And those are the ones that will help to balance out the equation. So where the energetics kind of come into is that, again, we're factually using herbs that are really that are made or have the phytochemicals to work with the brain, but then the energetic side of it is based on who the person is, what type of injury we're specifically dealing with, and we try to match up everything and create a really balanced formula, not just a allopathic formula where it's take this for this and use this for this. We really try to balance it out so that it really moves through the body and will help maximize the impact of what the herbs will do for the injury or the recovery of the injury, we'll say.
So when you say that the phytochemicals, what does that mean for people who may not know what that is?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, like as an example, I think the easiest way of kind of funny thing, we'll talk about wine for a minute, but everybody talks about tannins in wine. So tannins is there's actually chemicals in the wine that are tannins that actually create that astringent feeling. That's why a lot of people get kind of like that dry, astringent feeling. So it's the actual components, the molecules, and the way that they're made up that directs that action. So we're taught from a herbal standpoint that certain herbs all have key actions. And it's those key actions that we're looking at to help to mediate or to alleviate pain or whatever the condition is.
Well, that sounds fantastic. It feels like it adds a little bit more of the science to it that's different than maybe what somebody might consider about herbs. I've been around herbs for, I don't know, probably 30 years. So I personally have a strong understanding of the chemical components and that kind of thing. But I know a lot of people think about herbs as only just walking into the forest and picking certain plants. But knowing that there's really like biochemistry behind it and understanding the chemistry of the plant and how that's going to help different individuals with different challenges that they're facing, like fatigue, headaches, brain fog, dizziness, mood changes, and then matching that to their individual constitution. Would that be, am I understanding that correctly?
You're absolutely spot on. And one of the things that's most interesting is people would call plants, certain plants that we use for healing or for herbalism is weeds, but it's the secondary metabolites in the plant. So if a plant is not getting quite enough sunlight or not getting quite enough water, we'll say, or moisture, it fights and produces its own secondary metabolites to help to make that plant stronger so that it'll survive those adverse conditions. So ironically, the stronger or the more adverse the condition is, the stronger the plant is, the stronger the medicine is, because it has to fight for it to survive. And it's those secondary metabolites. Those are what creates those, what we call constituents, or the phytochemicals of what we actually want for those actions that you're referring to.
Well, that's pretty cool. I remember probably my entry point into herbs was probably about 30 years ago when I found out that the chemical component of aspirin is the same as white willow bark. That
Yeah,
was
it's a
my
white
very
willow bark.
first.
Yeah, another one, my favorite actually is meadowsweet. That's the one that I go to more often is meadowsweet. But yeah, aspirin was made from actually meadowsweet white. Well, it's that constituent again that we're looking for. But so again, when you look at plants, those commonalities of those phytochemicals are the ones that follow the line. So we have, we might have two or three, we might have four or five. In the case of like an anti-inflammatory, we might have 20, right? Different choices. So the herbalist job is to really pick what is the best anti-inflammatory, what is the best for the headache, what is the best for the pain for that person, because there are so many to choose from. And that's where a little bit of the energetics rolls into creating the formula.
Very cool. And can you explain from a herbal perspective why, as an individual is experiencing some chronic symptomology? So even if they've been medically cleared, they're like, oh, the physician has said, yeah, you're fine. And of course, Brynn and I, we have our perspectives from athletic therapy and osteopathy about why symptoms persist. But from a herbal perspective, what's your take on that? What do you think?
So there's a lot now we're getting outside the realm of the science, to be quite frankly. Now we're getting more into some of the realms. It has to do with when we sit down. We don't do a 10-minute interview I don't do a 10-minute interview with a client. I spend usually 45 minutes to an hour with a client, and there's a series of questioning that I do. And that might also come in or lead into some minor physical examination to see what's going on. But in the case of brain fog, a lot of times it's been proven, believe it or not, a lot of it relates right back to the gut. So what I do is I have a lot of question lines going around the gut. And the reason being is for that is because brain fog has more to do with not just the brain, but it also is related, and it's been proven scientifically. There's a lot of research out there on it, on the gut. And if we find that the person had, if they have inflammation, and the inflammation is not being properly brought out of the body, i.e., through the liver, because the liver has so many functions. And this is one of the things I've had the most success with in my program, is being able to help treat the liver and reduce and remove a lot of the inflammatory metabolites out. If we're not doing that, we're bottlenecking all the work that's happening in the physio level, all the work that's happening even on the medicine level and on the pharmaceutical level. If it's got nowhere to go, it just keeps recirculating the body. So we want to get that up and out. So it has to do with doing the interview, finding out what the person's doing, asking the right questions, and trying to drive our way into what's really going on. It's amazing when all of a sudden, when the microbiome is healthy, how much faster the brain fog lifts. In fact, I just had a client last week who I had to put on a specific gut protocol, and they had major brain fog. And what ended up happening is 3 weeks later, they came back to me and their brain is functioning like 5 times faster, and they're able to think again, and they're able to get their ideas back and chain those thoughts together again because we got the gut protocol in place. I actually didn't do anything for the head or the brain specifically. It was just around the gut.
I absolutely love that approach because that is exactly what we're seeing in all of our clients, that the longer they've had the concussion, the more it's impacted their digestive system, the more that things are not functioning properly throughout the rest of the body. And it's so interesting to see how you can make a small change in one place and it affects the brain. And it follows kind of the pathway that we take where we do a whole body reset. We don't even really do a whole lot with the head in the first session, but
Yeah,
regulating.
I could not agree more. And Brynn, I have to say that, you know, this is why I can't speak for all herbalists all around the world, but like I was really taught, was driven into my brain. I take it to heart that we are complementary. So our goal is to work with, if whatever the specific condition is if a referral comes into me at my clinic, when I see that person, is to really look at it from a different angle. If they're already getting the care from, say, the osteopath like Jenna, and then they're getting the care from you on the physio side, then I've got to look towards other means. And like I said, like I would be focusing in on the gut as one part of it. And, you know, maybe we put them on like a weed, feed, and seed protocol, which would be a protocol that specifically helps to get rid of um, really bad bacteria, parasitic or, you know, bacteria within the gut, and help get that flushed out of the body. And we start to build up a beautiful, healthy microbiome. Now we're all 3 of us, we're working in together to get a program that works balanced. So complementary herbalism is the most important, I think, to me, is the key to it, and working with it as a team, not as an individual, or it's a I thing. It's more of a team, and it's a collective effort where we work together and collaborate.
Yeah, I completely agree. And from an osteopathic perspective, we when we're looking at the body as a system, right? Variety of like a bunch of different systems that are working together, especially in a chronic case. Osteopathically, we might be also working on the liver, and a lot of the visceral work that we might be doing accesses the vagus nerve. If I'm doing any kind of neural manipulation, that will also have an effect on the vagus nerve. And, you know, to know that the there's all of these facets. A lot of the work that I do with somebody who's chronic is identifying gaps in their care. And a lot of times that is nutrition, that is herbs. They like to do, you know, they're doing breathing exercises, or they've searched YouTube, or, you know, somebody in their family said, oh, you've got to do this. But a really common aspect of this sort of wheel of care that's often missed is a herbal component or a really holistic nutrition component. A lot of times people will just say, oh, I'm taking ashwagandha or I'm taking ginkgo. And I know from a supplement perspective, if you're taking supplements, they work better together rather than just a singular supplement. In my interpretation from what you were saying, when you're looking at the individual and their whole system, their constitution, along with their symptomology, their history, so on and so forth, it's more than just, okay, I'm going to take some ashwagandha drops, or I'm going to go and I'm going to get some ginkgo. Could you speak a little bit more about, these common buzzwords, which are adaptogens and anti-inflammatory and that kind of thing, but how does that all come together for you, for somebody? Is there a situation where maybe those are herbs you wouldn't recommend, even though it's all over the place?
Absolutely. This is music to my ears, Jenna. Thank you so much for bringing it up. First off, I do want to say that my approach to herbal treatment, I've always said, is three-pronged. So it's like a three-legged stool. Herbs is only the one leg of the stool. The other side of it is diet and lifestyle. So if they just want to do a one and done thing, like take a herb and think it's going to solve their problems without reflecting on the other three prongs, we'll call it, it doesn't always work. So that's why a lot of people come to us and say, oh, I've tried that, but it doesn't work. Well, okay, what have you done? And that's where we started to get in that line of question. The other thing is, you're right. This is where the power of the internet sometimes overwhelms everybody, and they do talk about adaptogens. Everybody loves to throw out the word adaptogens. And the funny thing about that is that not all adaptogens, as you said, are the same, and they do work a little bit differently. And ashwagandha probably has to be, bar none, the most popular one that everybody likes to throw around. But there's lots of other ones as well. And we do have to be careful on our selection and what we use around things. Quite frankly, if somebody is actually returning from a tragedy, like some type of trauma, I like eleuthero, which ironically was called Siberian ginseng. So people tend to think it's a ginseng plant. It's not. That's why, as herbalists, we call it eleuthero. We're trying to get rid of the ginseng word out of it, because it's actually not even from that plant species. It's completely different. It's Eleutherococcus semitosus. Now, I know that word means nothing to you, but the funny thing about it is, in order for it to be ginseng, it has to have the Latin word panax in it. So it doesn't even have panax in it, which means it's not even from that plant species. But yet, that's what we call a Siberian ginseng. But that is my favorite convalescing herb. And it is an adaptogen. And I love it. If I have anybody tells me, hey, Joe, I'm going in for this surgery and I'm really worried, no problem. We'll take you off your herbs, whatever your protocol is, and I just put them on. In fact, I just did this last week. A person's going in for surgery. We're stripping away all the herbs, and they are simply going to drink a eleuthero tea to help with convalescing to get past the surgery. Then once they get past the surgery, we're going to meet again, and then we'll talk about, how to adjust things afterwards. So not all the time is it just use this adaptogen. Ginkgo biloba is another one. Ginkgo biloba is fantastic for the memory. Everybody knows ginkgo. Ginkgo's in everything, but a lot of people don't realize is that it cannot be used around blood thinners. If you're on any type of anticoagulant medicine, you cannot use it around that. And again, I can't speak for everybody in the industry about what I do, but I paid for access to a pharmaceutical database. Everything that I use for my patients is ran through a pharmaceutical database that is the same one that naturopath doctors have access to. So that I'm making sure that I don't have any counterindications, and that I'm aware of those counterindications, that, they flag for me so that I can change the herbs around. So I guess let me go back now to the very beginning and talk about, yes, we have these herbs that are for a condition. And yes, we have the energetics, but ultimately we also have to make sure we don't have any counterindications as well, based on the medications that people may be on. Because there are a lot of people that do come to me that are on prescriptions that I've got to work around. In fact, I call it threading the needle. It's like making sure that I hit it right in the middle so I can get the perfect herb without, upsetting the program. But yeah, we do have to be really, really worried about that. And another one that's interesting, it's not necessarily an adaptogen, but it is a nootropic, which is for cognitive support. And it's really good for inflammation, is rosemary. But rosemary can increase blood pressure. So if I have somebody that has a condition with blood pressure, I have to make sure that I'm not using rosemary. I certainly have to use something different, because I don't want to drive the blood pressure up higher. Another common one I see is lemon balm. A lot of people love lemon balm. In fact, lemon balm tea is very widely available on the shelves in most stores. But what people don't realize is that also reduces thyroid operation. So if you already have a low thyroid and you're using lemon balm, yeah, you're using it to relax because it's tanking you because your TH levels are dropping. So it's just using some common sense and getting to know the herbs. That's one of the reasons why we spend 3 years in a program doing materia medica, which is studying just the herbs, in addition to doing the biochemistry, in addition to doing clinical hours, is so that we know what these different herbs do in different conditions. So we're giving you the right herb. So again, there is the underlying reason we pick it. There is the energetics. But then the other side of the coin to it is there's the practical of the individual too. There is science involved in it more than people think. I hope that answers your question in the way I'm trying to look at it. And all these things came into mind as I'm going through it, like trying to give you, various different examples. The last one I can give you is valerian. Valerian's another one. I love valerian. It's a wonderful muscle relaxant, but if anybody is on the brink of an adrenal fatigue, believe it or not, valerian can have the reverse action on you. It can actually be like giving somebody 5 cups of coffee, and it'll wake them up instead of relax them. So it'll do the opposite. So it's a 50-50 shot with valerian. So if I have somebody who's extremely, extremely sensitive that's coming to me, they react very quickly to certain herbs. I won't necessarily bring valerian into the mix because I'm worried that it might have the adverse reaction. Now I've got somebody I'm trying to relax and I'm amping them up. We're going the opposite direction. That doesn't do us any good.
So this is fascinating, actually. And so all these different things that you've pointed out. So you answered a question that I had, and I didn't even know I had the question, is I remember years ago working in the gym where the ginseng shots were really common and people would sell them in the gym and then they would take it and they would do their shot of ginseng. And then I remember looking at a herbal compilation or whatever, and it had the Siberian ginseng in it, and I was like, well, that seems counterproductive. Like, how is that an adaptogen? Of course, you've just answered that question, which is wonderful. And I really don't think that information is widely known. And then, of course, with valerian, I didn't know anything about lemon balm. That is fascinating. And then valerian, my body. So the 3 things that my body does not like is white willow bark, feverfew, and valerian. It's a no-go for all 3 of those. Feverfew will make me feel worse. My headache will get worse. Valerian, it just is a bad match. Same thing with the white willow bark. So this has been so informative just on a personal level, let alone just all the things that we're thinking about with somebody with concussions, because of course they're tired, they might have some migraines. We don't necessarily know what their medical sensitivities are going to be. So this is really great.
So I'm going to go off on a sidetrack just for you personally, Jenna. I have to say that one of my favorite herbs around pain is Corydalis, which is actually it's a Chinese herb. But the way that we're taught, from a physicality standpoint is, the injury, you have what's happening at the surface level, then the nerves kind of make its way finally into the spine and its way up. So there's basically 4 to 5 points, right? As you know, that finally it registers in the brain. Well, Corydalis will actually help at 3 to 4 of those points along the way on an injury. So Corydalis is kind of one of my go-tos for pain. It has nothing to do with feverfew. It has nothing to do with some of these other ones. And the reason why I like it is because most people actually tend to get along with it. The only thing about Corydalis is that it's considered to be a cooling herb. So now we're going to get into a little bit of the energetics. So when I'm using something such as Corydalis, I have to follow that up with a little bit of ginger, which is a warming herb. Because you can imagine when people eat ginger, they usually they feel it come up. It's a circulatory herb, right? So you do have to balance that. Same thing with around protocols. Bacopa is one of my favorite nootropics. It's one of my favorite for cognitive support is Bacopa minori. which is a Ayurvedic herb. It's called Brahmi. Most people know it as Brahmi, but that's an extremely, extremely cold herb. So again, anytime I'm using Bacopa, I'm using some cinnamon or ginger to bring in to warm it up. But my point of this is that if you bring in that balance between the two, you may not necessarily get the big whack of the side effects and may not get along with it if the formula is actually balanced. The eclectics, which was a group of herbalists many, many years ago, they used to do a lot of simples. And sometimes simples are really good, especially if you have an overly sensitive person, because then we can gauge how it's affecting the body. We could pull it away. Too many formulas too many herbs in a formula can create. I have a hard time gauging what it is the person may or may not be getting along with. So the eclectics, like one herb per formula. However, where I have a problem with that is now we're getting into this part where it may be too cold, it may be too warm, it might excite the condition, it may make it worse. So I do like 3 or 4 herbs, but keeping it in a simpler formula so that it can counterbalance. So you still get the effects and the key action words like we were discussing earlier on the formula, but it's not delivering an off balance in the body either.
That's great.
Yeah.
I will
Brynn?
just say that the thing that stuck out to me was the one that you said that affects the thyroid and that many people don't know, and it's readily available. So people are taking it for something else, not realizing that if their thyroid's already not functioning as well as it should, that they're now putting something there that could make it worse.
Yeah, if you have
Yeah, the lemon balm.
hyperthyroid, which means it's overly active, lemon balm's fine. But if you're hypo, which means it's low, you bringing in lemon balm, you are actually going to tank it further, and we don't want that. So yes, that's a very common thing. So again, when I'm about to use lemon balm in a formula, I will always ask any problems with the thyroid, any history of thyroid, and if they're unsure or they say, yeah, once I did have, or there's a history, just take it off the table, move on to the next one, because we've got so many other things. We've got skullcap, we've got passion flower, we've got California poppy. I'm like, we have all these other ones we can use. I don't have to get hung up on the one, right?
I love that. And I love how you've made everything so clear that it's not as clear as people think it is. It's not like supplements where it's like, this will help with this. You just take one. Your body may not react that way to it because of other things. So it's very specific and very personalized.
It is. In fact, when you work in a dispensary, I've worked in dispensaries both at college. When I was studying there, I volunteered 2 days a week in the dispensary, and then I also worked at another establishment in a dispensary. And you could always tell when the formulas are made and they come in, and I would be filling the prescriptions, if you will, while I was working in the dispensary, and you could always tell the background of the person that wrote the formulas. And because it's not that I'm judging from the person, but like you can tell, like, oh, this formula is nice. It's got all the standard textbook items in it. You know what they're going to try, the condition they're trying to treat, but it's not balanced. Or they've got like 14 different herbs into one formula. It's like, okay, we'll just throw the kitchen sink at it, and whatever it is, we'll definitely get it because we have all this in there. But then it has a hard time of actually figuring out what it is working and what's not working. So again, I like formulas that are simple, not too simple. As I said, I like my 3-prong approach, and I like to keep it balanced and see where it is. And I always do it in the way where I have the person, I work with them, give them the formula. 2 weeks later, we do the check-in to see how it's going. If we've got to make any tweaks, once I feel like we're going in the right direction, then I start to span the appointments out. But usually in the beginning, it's one appointment, and then like 2 weeks later, a quick follow-up, because I do want to see how things are going and how things are progressing.
That's great. You just answered my next question, which is, what would somebody typically expect, like from a treatment plan in terms of the rhythm of that? Would people see you in person or online? Can they choose between the two? Do you have a preference?
Yes to all the above. So first, we'll start off with you can book in with me the way that I work is I do both in person and I do via Zoom or virtual. My preferment is in person only because if it's a specific condition, I can kind of see and gauge. There's a lot of body actions that I'm able to pick up a lot more easily when they're in person, they're in front of me versus, on camera. But I certainly can work in either, format. So, excuse me.
Yeah, that's great because sometimes, Brynn and I might be working with somebody who maybe they've traveled a bit of distance to come see us, or maybe they are looking to consult with us just to see who they can see in their own community. And so being able to have that resource to be able to say, okay, well, if this is missing in their recovery, knowing that there's an online option, I think is really important as well. So that's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it needs to be that way because, like you said, not everybody can travel to Richmond, and I'm aware of that. And I actually see clients actually even outside of Canada. I have a few clients that I see in the UK. I have several from Hong Kong, and then I being from the US, I actually have several clients that are from the US as well. So it's not feasible. Nobody's going to jump on a plane to come see Joe for a day. We know that. So the virtual piece is a big component of it.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that happens is getting people that are outside of our country the herbs, because of things that are going on in today's day and age. Importing and exporting formulas are getting a little bit more difficult. But what I've been doing is that again, it's instead of keeping it egoic where everybody has to use my stuff, I've been partnering with other practitioners around the world, and then specifically like in the UK, I found a herbalist that's willing to work with me. So I see the client, I actually create the formulas, but then I send that formula to the herbalist. We make sure that what I wrote, she has in stock. And then she actually creates it and sells it direct to the patient. And I step out of that transaction altogether. I just simply do the consultation and I do the actual creation of the formula. But then after that, everything's purchased through her.
Well, that's great. I love that collaborative approach. It's a triple win, right? Everybody wins in that
Absolutely.
scenario.
Absolutely. And even in the States, I mean, I've found suppliers in the States that will ship tincture specifically direct to the client. And so what I do then is, they'll buy several smaller bottles and then we have it dump into one bigger bottle. They shake it up and then they have their formula. So they're able to still get their herbal protocols in. And I have yet to find a herbalist per se, but I found a supplier that will do it. So same thing, works well.
Yeah. So, is there anything else that you'd like to touch on for your clients, our clients, anything you'd like to get out there? One last thing.
I have to say that you both have done an amazing job and asking the questions that you did and touched upon some of I would say the hot buttons that most of us as herbalists are kind of sensitive issues and you hit them head on and you've asked the questions and I think we've covered just about everything. I can say that if somebody is interested in learning about herbs and they want to see a herbalist, coming in for initial consultation is really fruitful because it gives the herbalist a chance to actually see what the conditions are and really get to know the person, whether that's virtual or in person. But to do that initial consultation, it does take an hour. I personally spend about an hour prior and usually 2 to 3 hours after on working on that client to build up and develop a formula that I think will work best for them. It's not that I'm slow. I just want to make sure that I've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's before I actually release my formulas. And, again, that immediate follow-up is really important to just gauge that the formula is working, that there's no bad interactions, that everything's flowing and moving in the direction we want. And then after that, it works out very well. And I think that giving a person a chance to do that and work with them and not get so it's not a I want it now approach. I guess that's the thing I'm trying to get to. It's not instant gratification when you're working naturally. A lot of people are so used to taking this thing and having it react right away, and it doesn't necessarily always change on a dime like that. It's a little bit slower of a progression, but it's a natural progression. And with that natural progression, there's a lot less side effects that are associated with it, as we all see. So
that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Joe, for joining Brynn and myself on this talk. It's been fascinating. And I think everybody's really going to be able to have a better understanding of how herbal therapy can help with them with their post-concussion and other things. And certainly have learned a lot in a short period of time, which can only speak to how much somebody would learn just by working with you one-on-one. So we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Jenna, thank you so much for your time. And Brynn, thank you for inviting me on the show. It's just been wonderful. I've had a great time, actually. You made my morning. This has been wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you. And we will put your links and how people can contact you, I think, with the videos when we put them up.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
So please send them to us.
Yes. Yes, I will send everything.
Okay. All right. Thank you.